function drafted. The Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management will come to order. Chair asks unanimous consent that the chair be authorized to declare a recess at any time during today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. Chair also asks unanimous consent that members not on the subcommittee be permitted to sit with the subcommittee at today's hearing and ask questions without objection, so ordered. As a reminder, if members wish to insert a document into the record, please also email it to documentsti@mail.house.gov. Chair now recognizes himself for purposes of an opening statement for 5 minutes. I want to begin by thanking our witnesses for being here today to discuss the Federal Bureau of Investigation's current real estate footprint and space strategy. The FBI has a massive real estate portfolio across this country comprised of a headquarters building in downtown Washington, D.C., 56 field offices, and more than 350 satellite offices, also known as resident agencies under its field office umbrella. Together, the network of field offices and resident agencies represent more than 12 million rentable square feet of space. The FBI also controls the campus at Quantico, Virginia, a data center in Pocatello, Idaho, and has substantial presence at the United States Army's Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama. And several years ago, GSA completed construction of a new records management facility in Winchester, Virginia. Currently, we have GSA prospectuses for FBI leases pending committee approval that would account for nearly 800,000 square feet of space costing $40 million annually, or nearly $800 million over the terms of the proposed leases. And we recently received the official proposal for a new FBI headquarters building in Greenbelt, Maryland. The bottom line is the FBI's space footprint is massive and costly, and so it is critical that we ensure the FBI's real estate is right-sized and that we understand how each proposal for space fits into an overall strategy. Now, some of the FBI's space proposals simply don't make sense to me or us. For example, despite the FBI's decreasing the number of people working out of a new headquarters, the current headquarters proposal maintains the same 2 million square feet of space as proposed in 2016. So less people, but the same amount of square footage. And the price has ballooned. The cost went from under $3 billion to now well over $4.3 billion. And that is on top of the FBI proposing to maintain a headquarters footprint in the District of Columbia as well. To make matters worse, the Office of Management and Budget proposes to fund most of this project through the creation of a new Federal Capital Revolving Fund, or an FCRF, that would need $10 billion in seed money. The FBI testified before this subcommittee a few months ago in December of last year that the Greenbelt site, in their view, created challenges because of the site size and the presence of wetlands. And I suspect these challenges also significantly increase construction costs. At the hearing in December, the Bureau also raised concern about GSA's site evaluation and selection process due to former GSA Public Building Commissioner Nina Albert going against the recommendation of the nonpartisan site selection panel and selecting a site owned by the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, or WMATA, her former employer. Following this hearing, Chairman Graves and I sent letters continuing to inquire into this decision, which included document production requests to both GSA and the FBI. And while I appreciate GSA and the FBI responding to our letter and providing an initial document production, I would like to know the status of efforts to identify and produce all responsive documents to this committee. That would include copies of communications between GSA, the FBI, and other administration officials. You received the oversight request 5 months ago and have had more than enough time to fully respond and comply with the committee's request. Returning to a point I raised previously, we currently have lease prospectuses for FBI field offices pending before the committee. And how can we be expected to sincerely and completely evaluate that without all the information? After the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing and continuing after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the FBI's space requirements were adjusted, resulting in an expansion of its field operation. In recent years, the full committee has been asked to approve new and replacement leases for many of these field offices, yet it has been unclear how GSA and the FBI are assessing ongoing space needs based on current threats and mission. The taxpayer winds up paying for many of these leased buildings several times over without any equity accruing, even after the taxpayer invests tens of millions of dollars for special build-outs in these buildings. However, GSA continues to be stifled from even negotiating discounted purchase options in these leases, despite overwhelming passage of legislation authoring the GSA to do exactly that. Now, today we have an opportunity here to make sure we don't overbuild and overlease for the FBI and save the taxpayers potentially billions of dollars without compromising mission. I hope today we can get to some answers as the committee prepares to review any proposal for a new FBI headquarters and pending and future FBI office lease prospectuses. The chair now recognizes Ranking Member Titus for 5 minutes for her opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Perry, for holding another hearing on the FBI's real estate footprint. Appreciate the witnesses being here. Especially nice to see you, Mr. Dooms. You're looking good. At our last hearing on the FBI in December of 2023, this subcommittee examined plans for a new consolidated suburban headquarters for the FBI. Since that time, GSA has submitted to this committee a report on the construction of a new headquarters building. So I look forward to discussing this report with Mr. Dooms, our GSA witness. I'm interested in receiving more information on GSA's procurement strategy and funding needs, particularly on how GSA is going to provide the FBI with a secure, modern facility that it needs while also ensuring efficient use of taxpayer dollars. I also look forward to hearing from our FBI witness, Mr. Demos, about the FBI's broader real estate strategy. After 9/11, as you heard from the chairman, the FBI's mission expanded dramatically. We had 16 new FBI offices completed, 15 more were under contract or had been authorized by Congress. At the time, the FBI indicated that their field office program was the largest lease construct program in the history of the federal government. Today, the FBI occupies 5 headquarters buildings, 56 field offices, 350 resident agency offices all across the country, and the majority of these are under leases procured by the GSA in privately owned buildings. It would be helpful to know from the witnesses how many of the FBI leases will be expiring within the next 5 years. Second, whether there are plans to consolidate and relocate offices. And third, how the FBI will protect its data in co-located spaces and buildings not owned by the federal government. Finally, with these questions in mind, I'd like to get a sense of whether any of the FBI field office prospectuses that have already been submitted to this committee will need to be amended to accommodate the fluctuations we're seeing in the real estate market. So again, I thank our witnesses for being here. I look forward to today's discussion, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair thanks the ranking member. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Larson, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chair. Today's hearing will examine the FBI's real estate needs. I want to thank the witnesses for participating in this hearing, which comes less than 4 months after they both testified at a hearing on the site selection process for a new headquarters building. The FBI has a broad mission and mandate. The FBI combats terrorism, espionage, cybercrime, public corruption, organized crime, white-collar, and violent crimes. The FBI started to transform its field operations following the Oklahoma City bombing, and this work accelerated in the wake of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. To meet its post-9/11 mission, the FBI added more than 12,000 staff and contract personnel and formed 653 state and local task forces. The data collection needs expanded, and the new facility security requirements were implemented. The FBI's current 56 multi-tenant and standalone facilities across commercially leased and federally owned facilities must accommodate data storage, evidence storage, firearm storage, special equipment and vehicle storage, command centers, SCIFs, and interview rooms, all which require money and space. And over the past few years, FBI facilities in Atlanta, Phoenix, Houston, Cincinnati, and Seattle have been attacked. I hope the witnesses will explain how GSA and the FBI are working together to protect facilities and the employees who work in them from domestic terrorism. I also would like to know the potential impact on the FBI staff and operational capabilities if a new headquarters building is not built soon. The FBI has an important mission, and its employees deserve safe, secure, and a functional workspace. I look forward to discussing how this committee can help ensure the FBI has the infrastructure that it needs today and into its future. So with that, I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentleman. I would now like to welcome our witnesses and thank you each for being here today. Briefly, I'd like to share a moment to explain the lighting system to our witnesses. I know you've been here before, but let's just make sure. There are 3 lights in front of you. Green means go, yellow means you're running out of time, and red means please conclude your remarks. I ask unanimous consent that the witnesses' full statements on both panels be included in the record without objection, so ordered. Chair also asks unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open until such time as our witnesses on either panel have provided answers to any questions that may be submitted to them in writing without objection, so ordered. The chair also asks unanimous consent that the record remain open for 15 days for any additional comments and information submitted by members or witnesses on either panel to be included in the record of today's hearing without objection, so ordered. As your written testimony has been made part of the record, the subcommittee asks that you limit your oral remarks to 5 minutes. With that, Mr. Dooms, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Perry, Ranking Member Titus, Ranking Member Larson, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. My name is Elliot Dooms, and I am the Commissioner of the Public Building Service at the U.S. General Services Administration. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on how PBS supports the Federal Bureau of Investigation's real estate needs and strategy.
Mr. Dooms, can you pull the mic kind of like straight at you there? Yeah, thank you, sir.
GSA's intent is to deliver the highest quality facilities for the FBI while maintaining our agency goals of optimizing the federal footprint. GSA partners with federal agencies like the FBI and community stakeholders to meet our mission of providing real estate solutions for the federal government at the best value to the taxpayer. We accomplish this mission by implementing a real estate portfolio strategy to prioritize investments that make optimal use of federally owned facilities, disposing of unneeded facilities, and implementing strategies that reduce costs. GSA drives our strategy forward in partnership with agencies like the FBI to support their long-term mission. For the FBI, our priorities are the construction of their new headquarters and the support to acquire and administer their field office operations. PBS is fully committed to providing high-quality space for the American taxpayer. GSA's fiscal year 2025 budget request includes $1.6 billion for repair and alterations, of which $584 million is for major repairs and alterations, and a new request for a $425 million optimization program that will allow GSA to reconfigure and renovate federal buildings to better utilize space and to expedite the disposition of unneeded federal facilities. With full access to the Federal Buildings Fund, PBS will be able to reconfigure and renovate core assets under GSA's controls in efforts to right-size our federal footprint faster while saving taxpayer dollars and supporting local economies. GSA leverages its expertise and best practices to support the real estate mission requirements of the FBI. I will provide 2 examples that illustrate how GSA has worked with the FBI to shrink its footprint and better utilize existing federally owned facilities. First, in October 2020, the FBI was able to eliminate 2 leases and reduce the total space needs by over 50,000 rentable square feet in New York City by consolidating into the Javits Federal Building. This consolidation resulted in lease cost savings totaling $13 million annually. Second, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, GSA renovated space in the William J. Green Jr. Federal Building to restack the building and enhance security features, which in turn allowed FBI to consolidate 2 existing leases into that space. This consolidation eliminated the need for 31,000 rentable square feet with an annual reduction of $840,000 in rent. In accordance with the Consolidated Appropriations Act of fiscal year 2022, last month, GSA submitted a report on the construction of a new suburban headquarters for the FBI in the National Capital Region. The FBI headquarters suburban campus will bring together employees from the Hoover Building in 8 leased locations across the National Capital Region for a new, modern, and secure facility tailored to fully support the FBI's national security, intelligence, and law enforcement mission. The report included a summary of the material provisions of the construction and consolidation of the FBI and a new headquarters facility, including all estimated costs associated with site acquisition, design, construction, management, and inspection, and a description of the buildings and infrastructure needed to complete the project. Now that the relevant committees in both the House and the Senate have received the headquarters report required by Congress, GSA awaits the necessary approvals before acquiring the Greenbelt, Maryland site and commencing with design and construction activities. The FBI's space needs are not limited to the National Capital Region. Multiple locations throughout the country are experiencing significant challenges. Because the space requirements of the FBI require significant tenant improvements, GSA works closely with the agency to ensure efficient use of space and cost effectiveness for taxpayers. Currently, the FBI occupies 56 field offices across the country, 47 of which are leased by GSA, totaling approximately 12.5 million rentable square feet. The remaining 9 FBI field offices are located in GSA federally owned facilities under GSA's control. At these locations, the FBI pays rent that is deposited into the Federal Buildings Fund with the expectation that the rent will be used to adequately maintain the facilities that the FBI occupies. Providing GSA with full access to the FBF is crucial to our mission of providing the highest level of support to not only the FBI, but to other federal agencies. In conclusion, GSA's mission is to provide the best value in real estate, which means working with the agencies like the FBI to deliver the functional and secure federal facilities that they need in order to fulfill their missions. GSA looks forward to continuing to work with the FBI and this committee on these important projects, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dooms. Mr. Demos, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony, sir.
Chairman Perry, Ranking Member Titus, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me today to discuss the FBI's real estate strategy. The FBI's mission is to protect the American people and uphold the United States Constitution. We do this work from our 56 field offices located in metropolitan areas across the United States and in approximately 350 smaller regional sites across the country. From these roughly 400 locations, we cover over 3.8 million square miles of United States territory, where we gather intelligence on terrorists seeking to harm Americans, where foreign intelligence actors seek to erode our economic and military capabilities, where our companies are being hacked, where fentanyl is being trafficked, and where gangs are threatening our communities. Our mission directly impacts the type of space we need. Standard office space does not meet the needs of our special agents, intelligence analysts, scientists, and other professionals. The FBI requires command centers, interview rooms, space for seized drug evidence, weapons vaults, computer forensics laboratories, automotive bays for SWAT vehicles, and space to house equipment for the FBI's chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosives response mission. In addition to FBI employees, our national security and traditional law enforcement programs are supported by more than 7,000 task force officers, many of whom are co-located in FBI space for case coordination and intelligence sharing. These officers support us through cyber, violent crime, gang, and joint terrorism task forces. Our communities are safer, our country is safer, because we are sitting side by side with these partners. Security also drives FBI space requirements. Hostile actors seek to cause harm to FBI personnel and facilities and exfiltrate sensitive information. As we saw just last week when a hostile actor rammed into the gate at the FBI's Atlanta field office, security requirements like vehicle barriers provide critical protection to our working men and women and to our sensitive intelligence. While these mission, partnership, and security requirements incur additional facilities costs, the FBI team and I are committed to being responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars. As part of this commitment over the past several years, the FBI has reassessed the geographic distribution of key functions, relocating programs and teams from the National Capital Region to West Virginia, Idaho, Alabama, and other locations across the country. As a result, over the past 5 years, the FBI has consolidated 10 leases in the National Capital Region alone, totaling almost $24 million in annual rent savings. In recent years, we've also reduced our office space workstation size and consolidated closed investigative files at our Central Records Complex in Winchester, Virginia. We are similarly transitioning evidence storage from costly lease space across the country to a facility in Georgia. We have relocated many assets outside of the National Capital Region, and yet certain functions must remain in the DC area, which is why the new headquarters project is critically important to us. Investing hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, to sustain the J. Edgar Hoover building is not the best use of taxpayer dollars, hence our request for a new facility and why the FBI and GSA continue to partner closely on next steps for the project. The risk of doing nothing to protect our people and sensitive information is too great, with continued pipe bursts, concrete instability, and failing heating and cooling equipment at JEH. As we work together on the new headquarters project and other important facilities needs across the country, you have the FBI's and my commitment to ensure we are doing right by the taxpayer each step of the way. Thank you for inviting me to appear before you today, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Well, we thank you both for your testimony. We will now turn to question. The chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes for question. I'm going to start with Mr. Demos. As you know, Congress is expected to consider reauthorization of Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Can you tell members of the committee at which FBI facilities, the ones you've enumerated, including headquarters, the satellite facilities, the numerous places around the country, does the Bureau receive, store, and sift through the commercially provided data on Americans, or is it done across multiple locations and offices?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. I am not an investigator of the FBI. I'm a facilities and finance guy.
You work for the FBI, right? You know what their mission is. You know what they do. You're testifying before this committee where we consider the leases and the space that the FBI gets. So I would think you would know the mission so you could impart it to these members of this committee so we can make the appropriate decisions. I'm just asking, where does that occur? If you don't know, then we will ask you to find out, but we need to know where that occurs.
So, sir, well, I can't get into the specifics of talking about FISA as an
I'm just asking about the third-party data that the FBI buys where they would otherwise need a warrant. Where do they use that information? Where do they cull through that information? Is it done at multiple facilities? Is it one facility? Is it a couple facilities? What are we looking at?
I'd have to follow up with you, sir, on the specific facilities where that type of work would be conducted.
Okay, then I'm going to ask that you do that. I'm going to need to know that answer. So that's going to be a formal request. Regarding what's known as the integrated program management, I would call it a quota system. I'm sure that you folks don't like that terminology, but it's apparent to me that that's what's used and it's planned out at the beginning of the fiscal year to ensure that these field offices and the different venues, for metrics' sake, if nothing else, they work towards those goals. Can you tell me, is that done across the panoply, the entire purview of the FBI's lease portfolio? Is that done at each one of the offices, or are there certain places where that integrated program management quota system is not used?
Congressman, just to make sure I understand the question, you're asking how integrated program management affects our leasing strategy?
Yeah, is it used at every single one of the locations, that quota system? We need to, the point is that if you're using that quota system to provide results that are metrics, and you're asking the American taxpayer to fund all these different locations based on that, that would drive our decision. It certainly would drive my decision on the value of the lease space and how much you actually need.
Sure.
And it includes, when I talk about integrated program management, it would also include the bonuses that are received by FBI officials for reaching or attaining that quota. And if that's occurring at all these different locations, that would drive at least my decision too. So I'm interested to know if that integrated program management quota system is instituted at every single location, including headquarters.
My understanding, sir, and I can take this back to confirm, but IPM is really focused on field office metrics and evaluating field office performance with a whole lot of feedback and analysis and support by headquarters components. And I would say, stepping back from IPM specifically, each year, the FBI is evaluating the threats in each of the specific field offices, evaluating staffing levels at those field offices to ensure that we are appropriately staffed and we're working the threats as we should.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, Mr. Demos, sir, but I want to, so if I'm going to characterize what I'm hearing, I want to brief you back, is that IPM, what I would consider a quota system for law enforcement, is used at every one of the offices other than headquarters. Is that essentially what you're telling me?
I am not an expert in IPM, sir, so I would need to follow up with my colleagues.
Okay, then that's going to be another specific request for your office to return the information to us, this committee. Can you explain why the FBI is still proposing authorization for 2.1 million square feet and how with less individuals? What are we missing there?
No, I appreciate that question, sir. So there is still a significant amount of planning still required by the FBI as we put together our more detailed program of requirements. The report that was submitted a couple weeks ago references up to 2.1 million square feet, but I will tell you there is still a whole lot of additional work that I need to be doing on my end within the FBI before I can give you and the committee, kind of a final answer on what we think our square footage requirement is.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you're saying it's a work in progress and
Yes, sir.
that number actually might be adjusted down. But we'll be interested in that information. I see I've gone over my time, so I'll yield to the gentlelady from Nevada, the ranking member, Ms. Titus. Okay, Ms. Titus yields to Mr. Larson.
Well, thank you. I prefer that she didn't yield to me because I don't want to take her time. So hopefully you mean that she has her own 5 minutes. Got it.
You're taking her place in the order. That's how I
Got it.
see that,
Okay,
as long
good.
as you're okay with that.
Yeah, I'm fine
Chair's
with
okay.
that. Fair enough. Thanks. Stickler for rules. Mr. Demos, your testimony didn't necessarily come across as a glowing endorsement of the selection process, as we've discussed it in the past. And so when you appeared before the subcommittee in December, you expressed concerns, the FBI's concerns with the selection process for the new headquarters. And last week, GSA submitted a report proposing the site acquisition pursuant to the FY22 Consolidation Act. So where does the FBI sit in terms now of it, with its satisfaction with the process that resulted in the selection of the Greenbelt site?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. Our process concerns remain. They have not changed. And so we continue to await the findings of GSA's OIG so that we can see their complete review and analysis of the process concerns that we've put forward. But of course, we know, separate from those process concerns, that the J. Edgar Hoover building is still failing, and we need a long-term solution for a headquarters facility.
Yeah.
And so we continue to work with GSA from a construction planning perspective.
Okay, great. And the title of this hearing, From Headquarters Building to Field Offices, Examining the Real Estate Needs and Strategy. We haven't asked anyone to investigate this. Obviously, we're asking some questions about the use of field offices and whether or not the footprint in field offices is both enough or too much. Is it the right kind of footprint? How would you assess GSA's analysis of your field office footprint and the uses that are necessary for these field offices?
Sure. No, thank you for that question. We continue to evaluate our field office portfolio. And going back to my beginning remarks, we continue to evaluate our field office portfolio because the threat continues to change. And as trends across the country adjust, we must similarly be evaluating our staffing model as technology adjusts over time. That impacts some of the specific space build-out and power build-out in our facilities as more and more of our investigative work involves high-tech type capabilities. From a threat environment perspective, we're also continuing to evaluate how the threat impacts security risks to our people, to our facilities, to our information. And so we continue to evaluate the threat environment and how that might impact changes we need to make to our security posture. And I would say, beyond just reflecting on this, we have very real-world examples of how we have adjusted our field office posture over the last several years. Over the last 12 years, we've closed 24 of our resident agencies while opening 4. We've obviously put forward our plan to consolidate the Knoxville and Memphis field offices into Nashville, which is a significant level of kind of reevaluation and reimagination of our support to the state of Tennessee. So we are continue to evaluate improvements and adjustments to our field space plan.
Mr. Dooms, in a typical procurement, GSA provides the shell of the building and the agency pays for the build-out. Given their FBI's security needs, imagine the FBI's build-out cost can be relatively high. Do you all calculate those the upfront costs of build-out, and does that then discourage agencies from moving when leases expire? Is there too much, I don't know, captured capital, if you will?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. That is certainly a part of our consideration. These high TI costs do impact, but GSA provides the basic shell, and we try to find a competitive rental rate within the district and target that rate. And then the FBI brings money to the table to build out some of those specialized uses that they have that you outlined earlier. And we work together, and sometimes we're able to hit the mark. Sometimes leases are the most cost-effective way. We like to do construction because oftentimes owning a building is more cost-effective than leasing. But because we have limited resources and we don't have full access to the Federal Buildings Fund, unfortunately, sometimes we are forced to move to leases instead of federally owned construction.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair thanks the gentleman. The chair now recognizes a gentleman from Wisconsin, Representative Van Orden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dooms, do you know who Nina Albert is? Nina Albert? You do. Can you turn your microphone on, please?
So, I'm sorry. Yes,
Okay.
Congressman.
And she's the former building commissioner for GSA,
She is the former Public Building Service Commissioner.
correct? And what is she doing now?
I believe she is the Deputy Mayor of Economic Development for the District of Columbia.
Right, so she's in charge of public buildings for the District of Columbia. So she left the GSA because she was an abject failure at her position. That's just a fact. And so now she's moved on to run the public buildings for the city of Washington, D.C. So could you see potentially that this would maybe not give us the greatest amount of confidence in the GSA's ability to plan for certain activities such as reimagining the entire footprint for the FBI? That's a rhetorical question. Mr. Demos, what is the occupancy rate of the J. Edgar Hoover building right now at, what time is it? 10:37 on Wednesday, April 10th?
On average, I think we're roughing at over 4,000 seats filled at this point in the J. Edgar Hoover building, sir.
How many seats are available?
Around 6,000.
So how many are filled right now?
Around 4,000, sir. A little over 4,000.
All right, so I was going to list the guys. I'm just going to do that math in my head. It's about 2/3 occupancy. Is that right?
Yes, sir. So there's certain portions of the facility, particularly the lower levels, where we've needed to remove people from the space, given some of the infrastructure challenges that we've had in the building.
Yep.
There's also continuing to be significant infrastructure challenges that limit how much high-tech capabilities can be in the facility.
I get it. Okay, so you said the FBI's mission is to, your operational spaces, conduct joint operations, federal, state, and local stuff. You're doing joint counterterrorism, cyber, protecting the seats of the streets. You support unique missions, including custodial spaces for suspects, interviews of victims, evidence of holding, processing weapons, ammunition, computer forensic laboratories, automotive and stuff. So it takes a lot of space, right?
It does, sir.
Okay. Can you tell me how much space it takes to have FBI agents surveilling parents at school board meetings and deeming members of the Catholic Church as domestic terrorists? How many office spaces did that take?
Congressman, I appreciate your question. That is, I can't speak to that question, sir.
You can't. So what's your pay grade? I mean, it's public information.
I'm a member of the Senior Executive Service, sir.
Okay, so you're an SES dude in charge of the buildings for the FBI, and you can't tell me how many of your office spaces are used to conduct surveillance on American citizens and parents at school board meetings asking very specific questions about their treatment of their children and or declaring the Catholic Church, members of the Catholic Church, domestic terrorists. The reason I asked this question for you is that I don't really think that you guys have taken the time to do a detailed, in-depth study of what you're actually doing, your members. And so if I take that to be true, which it is, then I don't think you can sit here and tell us how much space you actually need. Because unfortunately, your agency has gotten so far off mission from when it was established, your building's named after J. Edgar Hoover, gotten so far off task that I don't believe that you are capable of honestly telling us the mission needs of the FBI at this point. So in combination with the GSA's inability to actually plan for a building and your inability to articulate exactly what the mission is of the FBI, other than these flowery, neat words, I don't have any confidence that we're going to judiciously expend American taxpayers' dollars. And let me be straight with you. One of my best friends in the world is a former FBI agent who I deployed with in combat to Afghanistan, and I would do anything for that man. I protected his life specifically. And so I have great reverence for the former institution of the FBI. But I, along with the majority of my constituents and so many American citizens, have lost faith in your institution. And for you two to sit here and ask for billions and billions and billions of dollars without being able to articulate why you need it is just another symptom of a broken institution. With that, I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentleman. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentlelady from Nevada, Ms. Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Demos, let me be sure I understand. When you say it's 2/3 occupied, doesn't that include some people who have field assignments, come in occasionally, kind of like here in the House? People are working, they're in and out of committees, in and out of their office. It's not something that you can count like it's 2/3 occupied.
It is a constantly fluctuating number, ma'am.
Yeah.
I mean, as you said, I mean, there are operations going on every day that is causing people to surge into the facility, causing people to leave the facility on a given day. Of course, there are large portions of the facility that are not dedicated just to workspaces in terms of desks and seats, but also to operational space, command centers that we use in the course of day-to-day management of the FBI.
Storage, that sort of thing. Yeah, I just want to make that clear for the record. Mr. Dooms, according to the report, the site selection report that the GSA just submitted, $845 million in construction funding has already been appropriated, and $3.5 billion, though, for this new headquarters, or it was going to be transferred from the proposed federal capital revolving fund. Now, that fund doesn't exist, and it hasn't. Several presidents have tried to get this on, and they haven't been able to. So you have some secret that this is going to be constituted, or do you have some alternate plan for if it doesn't happen?
Thank you for that question, Congresswoman. Our approach right now is we are requesting the creation of the Federal Capital Revolving Fund along with $10 billion worth of seed money. We've also been requesting money through the normal appropriations process, but we continue to believe that that is the best way to fund the FBI headquarters. But we remain committed to working with this committee, as well as other committees, about any other solutions that are on the table. But right now, that is the administration's plan.
If that new building is built out in Maryland or Northern Virginia, what happens to the old Hoover building?
Congresswoman, we would, just like any other property in our portfolio, we would examine what the possibilities are. There is the potential that we might retain the site, dispose of the site. We have a national portfolio plan where we scour our inventory and we evaluate each and every asset, and we decide, we've been making decisions about what our core assets are that we'd like to reinvest in, and assets that are not our core assets, we are looking at the possibility of disposing them. As this plan with the FBI becomes a little bit firmer, we will evaluate the Hoover building in the same fashion.
Well, the new headquarters won't be called Hoover, will it?
Congresswoman, it has been the practice of GSA that we do not name buildings. We await on direction from Congress.
I heard my colleague talk about how much you respected the old FBI, but not the new FBI, and I guess that means J. Edgar Hoover with all his issues. Anyway, I'd like to go back to Mr. Demas, and I want to ask you about your position on utilizing public-private partnerships to acquire space. Is that something that's actively pursued? And if it is, how do you get the security for those buildings if you don't control the construction or the management of the building? You were talking about needing fencing or certain high-tech accommodations and just the security in and out the door. How does that work?
I mean, specifically on your question, Congresswoman, about how does the FBI view public-private partnerships as a means of funding space projects, we ultimately rely on funding strategies in coordination with GSA and the Office of Management and Budget, so I'd probably defer to Mr. Doom specifically on that point. But as a general matter, how do we handle security in leased facilities, non-federally owned facilities? We have a layered approach to security in the FBI. As part of our process, we have security professionals who will review the sites, who will put forward recommendations that I on my team will implement to ensure appropriate physical security, technical security, things I probably can't get into too much more in this setting. We also have processes to ensure that all individuals entering the space have the appropriate clearance and have been vetted so that no individuals are entering into FBI space without appropriate authorization. There are also, of course, elements that come up in the requirements gathering process for the PORs for the sites where there's rules on setback and vehicle barriers, visitor screening facilities, those types of things. That depending on the procurement strategy, the building owner, the lessors could be incorporating into their building design and construction.
That's part of the rent, or is that on top of it, Mr. Dooms?
So we are required, for these above standard tenant improvement costs, the FBI is generally providing those funds upfront. And then from a maintenance perspective, that's worked on it's negotiated on a case-by-case basis with the lessor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair thanks the gentlelady. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Representative Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for being here. When we spoke in November, I raised some concerns about the adjustment in criteria that was made on your selection process, and I'll make note, I was shortly thereafter called to a woodshed conversation with Congressman Steny Hoyer. But in any case, I know that last month GSA submitted a prospectus and to Congress to consolidate the Hoover building as well as eight other buildings, and I know that there are a number of people, including our chairman, that have strong concerns about the criteria and what was actually submitted. I asked last time about the number of meetings, and I asked about the consultations between GSA and the FBI, and the conversations they had with representatives of of other states. Have you all provided any information to the committee about some of the meetings and consultations that you've had and the content of the meetings with the states on this site selection process and relocation?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. I believe we have provided this committee with some of that information. We provided over 6,100 documents, and we have continued to provide them on a rolling basis. But I believe we have provided you with consultation deliberations, as well as
Mr. Dooms, let me ask this, and I obviously that's a tremendous amount of information, but I'm not clear on how much information you have, so I don't know if that is 99.9% or I don't know if that's 1%. Can you give some clarity in regard to how much more information you think is owed to the committee to fulfill the request?
I do not believe that we have fulfilled all of the requests that we received in December, but we are committed to cooperating with this committee and continuing to provide you documents on a rolling basis.
Okay, I appreciate that. The next question, and I apologize, I had to step out for a minute and I didn't hear the full dialogue that you had with Mr. DeVio here, but in regard to Nina Albert, and did you provide clarity on which meetings she was involved in and any role that she played in this? Was that answered or information provided to the committee?
I believe so, Congressman. We've provided in our GSA reading room, this is as a part of making this a transparent site selection process. We've provided the documents related to the amendment to the site selection process that was made, I believe, in July of 2023, which made it clear that Ms. Albert was going to be serving as the site selection authority. So I believe we have provided those documents.
I look forward to following up with our chair and staff to make sure that those requests were fulfilled. I think we had the understanding that there may be some gaps in information on both of those. Next one is, as I understand, I think 50% of FBI employees actually are Virginia residents, and I think the other 50% are some combination of DC, Maryland, and a few other states. Have y'all done a traffic analysis looking at the impact of the Greenbelt site and what would end up happening with traffic patterns as a result? Traffic impacts?
Congressman, I don't believe we did a study of the traffic patterns, but transit was one of the factors and criteria that was considered when we were selecting the site. I believe that particular area, transportation access, was 20% of the site selection criteria. And I would point you to, it was a discussion of that in the site selection decision where we discussed what the impacts were to traffic and getting FBI employees to and fro from the site.
Last question I have, in the 117th Congress, we passed bipartisan legislation that allowed for the GSA to negotiate below market lease rates. Have you all received implementation guidance from OMB? Has that law been implemented?
Congressman, we continue to work with the Office of Management and Budget on the legislation that was passed. At the direction of this committee, GSA has been consistently trying to negotiate purchase options within our lease contracts, but there's still some disagreement as we continue to work with OMB about bargain purchase options.
And so I'm not missing anything in that the delay in implementing this is actually costing taxpayers more money potentially because you're currently not allowed to go and negotiate below market rates at this point?
We continue to work with OMB and with this committee on that matter, but right now, we do not believe we have the authority to negotiate bargain purchase options.
So what I said is accurate. At this point, you don't have the ability to save additional taxpayer funds, even though the law's been enacted.
We are committed to working with this committee, but no, we do not believe we have the authority to negotiate bargain purchase options.
Okay. I'll
Chair.
interpret that as a yes. Thank you. Yield back.
I thought so. Chair, thanks, gentlemen. Before turning to Ms. Norton, Representative Norton here, I just want to inform everybody that because the chair still has some outstanding questions and some of the other members do, we'll do a second round. But with that, Chair now turns to Representative Norton for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Dooms, it's good to see you again. Congress continues to miss your excellent work as a staffer. At last December's hearing on FBI headquarters, I asked you about the future of the site of the FBI's current headquarters on Pennsylvania Avenue in the District of Columbia. The current site is a prime opportunity for mixed-use development, which could help activate Pennsylvania Avenue and draw visitors off the National Mall and into downtown DC, and of course, generate tax revenue for the District of Columbia. You testified that GSA was currently working through a plan for the site. You also said that if GSA determines in its review that the site is surplus property, GSA will dispose of it. What is the status of GSA's review of that site?
Thank you for that question, Congresswoman. Unfortunately, I don't have an update. We continue to review this site as well as all of the assets within our 362 million square foot portfolio as a part of our national portfolio plan and identifying our core assets and which assets we believe are underutilized or surplus to the needs of the government. We have not come to a determination on the Hoover site at this point.
When you finish with that review, I hope you will submit it to this committee.
Absolutely, Congresswoman.
With a new headquarters, GSA plans to identify federally owned space to support 750 to 1,000 FBI personnel who will remain in the District of Columbia. Where is the GSA considering relocating these personnel in DC, and does this include new construction?
Congresswoman, we continue to scour our portfolio here in the District of Columbia. I think we plan to continue to work with the FBI as they work through their program of requirements, and as their program of requirements is finalized, we will look to some of the buildings here in Washington, D.C., perhaps some that are underutilized now, to find out the best candidate, working closely with the FBI on what their security needs are, as well as their proximity issues and their need to be close to the main justice, the White House, and Congress.
Well, is new construction included?
Congresswoman, right now, all of the options are on the table, but given our portfolio here in the District of Columbia, I think we would probably lean into repair and alterations on an existing building, but we have not come to a final determination, and we are waiting until the FBI completes their program of requirements.
I would also like to discuss plans for a new FEMA headquarters. The prospectus for the modernization of the ROD building at 7th and D Street puts the cost of total construction at $177 million. However, the pre-solicitation estimates put the cost of construction at $400 to $500 million. Why is there such a gap between the prospectus and pre-solicitation estimates?
Congresswoman, thank you for the opportunity to clarify on that issue. When GSA provides a building to another federal agency, GSA is responsible for providing a warm lit shell. And much like our relationship with the FBI has to bring a certain amount of money to the table to do the tenant improvements. So the prospectus that we submitted to Congress represents GSA's portion of the project, with the expectation that DHS is going to bring additional funds to the project, which takes it up from $174 per gross square feet up to somewhere between $400 and $500 per gross square feet for the actual full and complete building.
Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentlelady, and now the chair will recognize himself for the second round. Mr. Demos, I want to characterize my request to you this way. for the previous two questions that I asked that you would respond to. Will you, and can you commit to providing those responses within the next 2 weeks in accordance with the statements I mentioned when I opened these proceedings?
I'll work expeditiously to meet that timeline, sir.
2 weeks?
I'll do my best, sir.
Well, I know you do your best, but I need a commitment, so if it's not 2 weeks, I can accept that, but is it 3 weeks then, or what do you feel comfortable with?
We'll stick with the 2 weeks, sir. Do my
Okay,
best.
2
for
weeks. All right, thank you, sir. So with that, Mr. Dooms and Mr. Demos, in December, the Chairman Graves, and I sent the FBI, GSA, and the former Public Buildings Commissioner, Nina Albert, letters with specific questions and requesting production of certain documents. Interestingly, we only received former Commissioner Albert's responses by the deadline of the letter. We subsequently received initial responses from the FBI and the GSA that was missing a significant amount of the information requested. Then, not surprisingly, after this hearing was confirmed, we received an additional response on Monday, today's Wednesday, from the FBI, and yesterday, Tuesday, GSA, but we're still missing key responses to our request. When will the GSA and the FBI complete the document production to the committees? And Mr. Dooms, I know that Chairman Graves asked you essentially the same question. I know you're interested in cooperating, but look, we got to get something accomplished here. You have leases pending. We need to make decisions, but we're not going to make, I will guarantee you, I'm not going to make decisions or ask anybody on this committee to make decisions without the complete information. So I need to ask you when we will complete the document production, if you know.
Congressman, thank you for that question. We plan to commit the document submission as expeditiously as possible.
Can you commit to 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 month, 6 years? What can you commit to?
Congressman, we've been producing them on a rolling basis. We will continue to do so. We want to cooperate. We've been in close contact with your staff, but I don't believe I can offer a date certain, but
Can you give me your wildest guess? I mean, you get paid every pay period, whether you produce anything or not. The American people demand this information through their representatives. We have to make decisions on behalf of the FBI. We can't make the decisions without the information. What can you commit to? A year? 6 months? 1 month? Give me something.
as soon as possible, Congressman.
Well, as soon as possible, I'm going to characterize that as 2 weeks. Will you commit to 2 weeks? Seems like a reasonable amount of time to me. Because as soon as possible to me is like today, but I'm going to give you 2 weeks.
Congressman, we produce them on a rolling basis. We will continue to do so, and as soon as
Okay, so
possible.
you're not going to answer, you're not going to commit, Mr. Demos. You got anything better? This is the FBI, the most storied and effective intelligence and law enforcement agency on the planet. Can you commit to anything?
Again, sir, we will work as expeditiously as possible.
Well, I got to tell you, that's pretty weak in a business that I operated in and that I managed. You wouldn't have a job, but with that, let me ask one final question. Taxpayers invest a tremendous amount of money in leased field offices that go far beyond the rental payment. There are several examples of evidence rooms, holding cells, armories, classified rooms, physical security infrastructure, and a variety of other things. Most of these investments have a useful life far beyond the 20 years, and so it would seem extremely wasteful and unreasonable to ask taxpayers to pay for a new build to suit leases every 20 years for an FBI field office. Does that sound reasonable? Would you agree with that? It's unreasonable to ask them to commit to that and then that hard infrastructure goes away? Either one of you guys?
Sir, absolutely. There is a significant amount of upfront investment for FBI space, and that's why I would say as leases come up for renewal, that is why the vast majority, when we look at the procurement strategy, does not actually result in a relocation. As we look at the last 5 years, we had 14 commercial leases reach the end of life. 12 of those ultimately resulted in staying in place.
Well, I will tell you, we're going to be taking a look at that portfolio with that in mind. Some of the prospectuses pending before this committee would effectively guarantee that wasteful outcome, and we don't want that. So we don't want the highest cost option possible to be justified, and so I just want to let you know that moving forward. With that, my time has expired. And I would recognize now the ranking member, Ms. Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, over the course of the last couple of Congresses, we've approved several new museums for the mall. There's one for women's history and one for Latin American history, culture, et cetera. Are y'all working on finding locations for these new museums that are supposed to be on the mall? And why wouldn't you look at some of the underutilized buildings, like, say, the Department of Energy building, and work with the Smithsonian to use some of that space for these museums?
Congresswoman, thank you for that question. As you pointed out, the Smithsonian has the lead on identifying locations, and I believe they have identified 2 locations, but we're partners with the Smithsonian. We meet with them regularly, and we're always looking at our portfolio, and if they made a request of us, I can promise you that we will work in a cooperative fashion with the Smithsonian.
Well, will you check out where they are on this and let me know if they're moving forward, if they've made any substantive progress, or if they're just talking about it, or whatever?
Congresswoman, I will commit to you that I will absolutely meet with the Smithsonian and make sure that they understand that we're willing to be our partner with them and help them along the way.
Thank you. Going back to the investment that you have to make in some of these buildings that you lease that is up front, and you say it lasts for 20 years. Seems to me if you make an investment up front on something that lasts for 20 years, that's a pretty good deal. Plus, a lot of things change in 20 years, technology and stuff. So if you have to redo some things at the end of the 20 years, wouldn't that just be kind of the normal course of things?
Thank you for
Mr.
the question,
Demos?
Congresswoman. This is why for each lease that comes up for renewal, we work with GSA to reevaluate the requirements that we have for that facility. Again, looking at the threat environment, how staffing has changed, how technology has changed. And then we're working together with GSA on a specific procurement strategy for each.
Yeah. As you look out there for places to rent, have you noticed any unusual changes in the rental market based on the economy and post-COVID?
I'd need to defer to Mr. Dooms on that
Dooms.
point.
Congresswoman, I think you're right. I think there have been changes, and we are trying to evaluate. We are going into the market, and we are aggressively working with agencies to find the best deals. But to your earlier point, generally owning is cheaper than leasing. And this is why GSA has been pursuing a fix to the Federal Buildings Fund to give us full access to it because, for example, one of the outstanding FBI leases in Cleveland, we submitted a request to Congress to allow us to purchase the building because we determined that that was the best option for taxpayers, and that request was not met, and which is why we had to pivot and turn to leasing. But I agree with you, and this is why we support a fix to the Federal Buildings Fund, because if we spend the money on capital costs, we will be able to significantly decrease costs to taxpayers. And it's an important thing that we are pursuing here at GSA. It was in our FY24 budget request. It is also in our FY25 budget request. And the kind of projects that we're doing with the FBI, if we had full access to the Federal Buildings Fund, we would be doing construction projects instead of leases.
Gotcha. Well, thank you. I'll yield back. Thank you.
Chair thanks the gentlelady. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Representative Ezell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for being here today. Last week, the committee received an official report on the proposed FBI headquarters. This report calls for Congress to appropriate $10 billion to the Federal Capital Revolving Fund, FCRF. Even though this fund does not have congressional authorization, as I understand, similar requests to create and fund the FCRF have been denied in the past. Mr. Demos, given this history, do you think there's anything different about this request, and do you think it'll be funded?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. The requirement for the J. Edgar Hoover building and a replacement for it is real. The challenges with the facility only continue to grow, and we need congressional support and funding support for the project.
Okay. Switching topics a little bit, in Mississippi's 4th Congressional District, there are 20 GSA buildings. Of those 20, 3 buildings are owned by GSA, while the rest are leased. Among the 17 that are leased, the FBI has 3 satellite offices, all of which are multi-tenant offices. Do you believe this is adequate security at these FBI satellite offices in the multi-tenant buildings? If not, do you have any recommendations to improve the protection?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. Our satellite offices, our resident agencies have different leasing models throughout the country. Several are in multi-tenant buildings. That is not unique just to the state of Mississippi. As I said earlier, with each site, whether it's a standalone facility or a multi-tenant facility, we have a security review that takes place to ensure that it is an appropriate level of risk that the FBI is accepting and that we have the appropriate countermeasures in place in order to address that risk.
Very good. Thank you. Expanding on the topic of security, in 2020, the Secure Federal Lease Foreign Espionage and Suspicious Entanglements Act was signed into law. This act aims to prevent foreign influences on GSA leased buildings. However, all 17 buildings in my districts entered lease agreements before the enactment of the law. Mr. Dooms, how concerned should I be about the security of these buildings in South Mississippi and especially regional FBI buildings across the country? And what is the GSA doing to ensure FBI buildings are not indirectly controlled by foreign adversaries?
Congressman, thank you for that question. We are always concerned with security, and we continue to work with our partners at the FBI. In December of this past year, we submitted a list of all buildings owned by with foreign beneficial owners in any new lease actions, but there are also existing leases that we are trying to address, and we are proactively working with the FBI to notify them whenever there is a foreign ownership of a building that they're in so that they can take the proper mitigation steps.
Very good. Mr. Demas, do you think leasing FBI satellite offices is this the most efficient use of taxpayer dollars and accomplishes the mission of the FBI?
Our resident agencies, those satellite offices, are critically important components of the way we do our work. And so I would argue that the return on investment for the American people is exceedingly high.
Very good. I worked in one of those offices for 3 years during my career and felt very good every time I was there. And let's make sure we take care of our men and women who are out there enforcing the laws and protecting this country. So thank you. That, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentleman. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Representative Van Ork.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple of questions or a statement first. The gentlelady from Nevada, J. Edgar Hoover was responsible for some tremendous civil rights violations, and in no way, shape, or form do I support that at all. The FBI miss is the one that didn't conduct over 200,000 illegal instances of surveillance of American citizens, abusing Section 702 of the FISA to conduct unlawful surveillance on the former president, President Trump, who should be the next president coming up here, God willing. I'm talking about the FBI that did not classify parents at school board meetings and Catholics as domestic terrorists. That's the FBI, the new FBI, that I don't appreciate at all. And I also do not appreciate anyone insinuating that I would support anybody that would do anything to violate Americans' civil rights. That is not the case. I just want to clarify with Mr. Dooms, did the former chairwoman, Commissioner Nina Albert, participate in any of these negotiations at all? You said you told us that, and I don't recall hearing it.
Congressman, she was the site selection authority that ultimately made the decision that the Greenbelt provided the most value to taxpayers.
Okay, what I would like from you is a specific itemized list of every meeting that she had anything to do with, even tangentially, because as we discussed, she left in shame for a real good reason. And with that, I yield back the remainder of my time to Chairman Perry.
Well, thank you. I do have one remaining question for Mr. Dooms. It appears that the criteria for the site selection had changed at some point regarding the proximity to Quantico as well as as equity. And Maryland was able to address those changes in weighting of the site selection criteria. But it's my understanding that Virginia was not apprised of that. Can you confirm that?
Thank you for the opportunity to clarify, Congressman. In December of 2022, Congress directed GSA to have consultations with both Maryland and Virginia. We had those consultations in March. As a result of those consultations, we made changes to the criteria in July of 2023. That was reflected in the amendment to the original site selection plan. So it was always clear to both delegations. It was posted in our GSA reading room and publicly available. So the criteria change, everyone knew.
So it's your testimony and your position that the criteria was changed and both Maryland and Virginia had exactly the same amount of resources, including time and notification, to respond to the change in weighting of the classification criteria. That's your...
Absolutely, Congressman.
All right. I thank you for that. Gentlemen, I yield back the balance of Mr. Van Orden's time back to him if he needs it. If not...
Mr. Chairman, I do not. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. The gentleman yields back. Are there any further questions for any members of the subcommittee who have not been recognized? Seeing none, that concludes this hearing for today. I would like to thank each of the witnesses for your testimony, and we know it's not easy sometimes being here, but we appreciate you taking the time and standing for the questions. And with that, this subcommittee stands adjourned. Thank you, Madam.